All right, welcome back to Thought Stream episode 3. We didn't do any planning for
Thought
this one.
Atlas. Thought Atlas.
Thought Atlas, yes.
Thought
Right.
Stream. Or changing the name.
Thought Stream is what I named the folder that it's putting stuff into.
Oh, that's cool too, though. Thought Stream's cool.
And so
I
I
think
just,
like a river of like ideas. You know.
yeah. So a couple of things out there that I thought were interesting this week. Of course, we've got Elon Musk buying 10% of, or well, nearly 10% of Twitter. And then I just learned today there's another bill we might have to read through in a couple days.
What, the Ohio one?
No, a California one.
What's Oh, interesting.
The
What's like a competitor bill to the Florida one?
No, this is one about abortion where they're
Gosh. Transgender identity to kindergartners.
no, they allegedly are making a bill that absolves parents of any fault if their newborn dies in the first week of care, meaning that you can basically like murder your newborn or something in the first week. So it's saying that it legalizes post-birth abortion. But that's the thing is that's the accusation. We'll have to read it and see what's true and what's not. Wait,
Well, they're definitely like basically people who believe in abortion so much that they're like, yeah, like up to the moment it's being born, like you can make a decision about like terminating it. They're like legit, like big politicians that believe that.
you
I
know,
mean, it's fucking nuts. I mean, but
I gotta
yeah.
find out why it is that whenever like my mic turns on, it mutes you. I think it's probably a Discord setting. There's probably some sort of ducking setting because this is a new computer. Okay, let's not go into Discord. Okay, I clicked my Discord options thinking I could pop it up in a window and move it off screen, but it full screened and then it yelled at me. And it's like, hey, you're in streamer mode. Don't open the settings.
You're in thought streamer mode.
Yeah. So I'll deal with that later, but yeah. So the accusation is that it makes post birth abortion legal for a week. So
Dude, there's nothing more fucking sinister and insane to me. Like it's so fucking insane. You know?
right,
We're point like shit just is not fucking connecting. Like people are not able to acknowledge like the differences in biological gender. They're saying, like you can murder a baby for up to a week. I mean, if that's the case, you know.
mm,
Yeah, we could read about it, but
it,
anyway, let's talk about things we don't know about yet.
well, I mean, the thing what we do know about, which is interesting because it could lead into like if we wanted to talk about this whole Twitter thing, is just how it is that like all the to me it always seems like this the whole transgender fight and even to some degree this abortion fight seem almost like distractions from like some of the failures of government. Like they just want to bring out whatever they think will take people's mind off of like the lockdowns and all the unconstitutional shit and destroy businesses that they're possibly going to be liable and getting sued by in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, it's also think about the most contentious of all possible issues, transgenderism, abortion, you know? I mean, these things are like things that people on different sides like cannot come to agreement on anything. You know, it's like two different worldviews. You know?
See, and what's interesting about like, not that I want to do like a third round of like transgender issues at the moment, but like,
Yeah.
it almost seemed like early on, like, well, this is just a non-issue. Like, it's just the same thing as like the gay rights. They can already get married. Who cares? Whatever. And then they're like, no, we're going to take this to like a whole new level of absurdity.
Yep.
And it's just like, but why? Like, I don't know if they're just doubling down, thinking we got the momentum, so let's go for it. But I don't understand really even what they're trying to necessarily accomplish. It seems like the least, like if you're on the left, right? Like try to think from a leftist perspective, and you're trying to accomplish, with government the greatest good for the most number of people. Like you have a movement, you're targeting like a fraction of a percentage of the people in the country.
Because it's like it's really not about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's just what they say, and that's what a lot of people believe. But what I think it's really about is power. in the end, that's the calculus of the equation. It's like, this is about forcing people to acknowledge something that they know not to be true. I mean, it's like in 1984 when they're like, there's four lights, and they're like, how many lights are there? And he's like, there's four lights, and they're like, no, there's five lights, and they beat him. And then he says, no, there's four lights, and they keep beating him. And then eventually he says, okay, there's five lights. There's five lights. And they say, you know what? You're saying that, but we're going to keep beating you until you believe it. That's what we have going on here. And I don't think that even most people that are on the side of, like the legitimate side of oppressed peoples, the well-meaning people on the left aren't seeing that, and they're not believing that. I don't think most of the people on that side are mean-spirited or anything, but these issues are being wielded like a club by giant corrupt institutions that are using them to accomplish their own aims. And that's what the aim is. It's power, and it's kind of, it's forcing people into compliance to agree with something that they know not to be true,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of like the progressive thing to keep progressing, and it's not about accomplishing anything real or good in the real world. It's about just progressing. And to them, this is like a natural progression. Like, oh, let's demolish all the boundaries of things that people believe before, all the social norms, all the social mores, all the philosophical constants that people had, because they want to be in control, and they want everyone on the same narrative, on their narrative. That's why they can't tolerate any kind of dissent.
And on one hand, like, part of me wants to be like, oh well, I don't believe in the whole big institution thing, but at the same time, right, like, you have like I need to try to learn to use less filler words. But what we have going on out there is you have the majority of Democrats want sort of the same basic things, whether it's like healthcare or education or some sort of like housing aid. And it's the thought leaders that turn around and like say, no, our big issue is going to be like transgenderism. And it's just like, why? And then you get into this whole, well, they want you to believe something that's not true. And it almost fits too well, you know what I mean? Where it's like, what else could it be? Especially like within all the COVID stuff, that we're just going to take away all these constitutional rights and not let you get the lawsuits through the court system, which they're going to eventually get theirs on that, because those go to like a federal level and they'll end up in the Supreme Court eventually. But as many often say, a right delayed is a right denied.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, now you are putting the future of people's basic human rights in the hands of 9 people who, I mean, I'm not saying I know a better way to do it, but these things are obviously out of bounds. But not only does it take years and years, but now you're putting the decision in the rights of people that are ideologically driven. They have their own ideas. Some of them are more or less like trying to accomplish what the Constitution says. Some of them are outright like, nope, we're going to revise what the boundaries of this, the original boundaries of this document. So I don't know. But it's blatantly, I mean, a corollary during COVID was, for instance, like the vaccine mandates. They're like, everyone who said, what about natural immunity? What about people who already had it and have natural immunity? We know natural immunity is better, if not as good. I mean, as good, if not better, right? Why is there no such, like, why are we not even including these people in the calculations of what's going on? Why are we not even talking about it? Why are we even being censored and not allowed to talk about it? And it was just, well, everyone needs to get vaccinated. That's what they decided, and it's it. There was no connection to reality, because we knew it didn't prevent people from getting the disease. From day one, we knew it didn't prevent people from getting the disease.
I don't know if
to them it was like, nope, everyone get in line. Doesn't matter how many facts prove otherwise to what we're trying to accomplish. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's about their program, and that's it. They're all authoritarians.
No, I don't know if you saw this, but it was funny because there was a clip that showed up of Dr. Fauci years ago talking on a talk show where some lady asked him if I don't think it was about herself. I think it was about a friend of hers, but who knows? It could have been about herself because you know how people are. I just saw the clip the other day. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on exactly the setup to the question, but the question ultimately was, if I had the flu or if my friend had the flu, should I still go get a flu shot? And Fauci pretty much explicitly answers, no, like, you're already immune. The natural immunity you got is going to be much better than what you get from the flu shot. It's not going to help you at this point.
Right.
We got a guest. We got a guest showing up. Look.
I can't see it.
The cat's in the corner, like way down.
It's out of my view.
Oh, well, it'll be on the video.
Like a tail?
No, her head is right here. She's there. Oh, yeah, you might be cut off because you're on mobile, but she's down there in the corner pulling the edge of the black curtain up. So anyway, but yeah, he says, the natural immunity you're going to get. And so the thing is like, I went and I got vaccinated, even though I guess my family's saying that I didn't. But I won't show them the paperwork, but I have it. I might show them the paperwork eventually, just so they definitely eat their words. But in any case, but like the thing is, like, there's no place for the government to come in and tell you what you have to do, right? And even now, like, the more I learn, I'm like, well, this wasn't probably a good idea to even necessarily maybe get vaccinated. I'm not sure, because I got COVID before there was a vaccine. And it pushed my blood pressure like way up into like the 190 range. And then, so I had to go on all these blood pressure medications, some of which I'm still on. There was issues in an echocardiogram that they found where certain chambers of my heart weren't working properly. And then it got better, and then I got the vaccine, and then it got a little worse, and then it got a little better, and then I got the booster, and it got a little worse, and then it got better, and then finally, just earlier this week, they did a follow-up echocardiogram now over a year later and said, basically, you're good now. Everything's back to normal. And so it's like, well, I don't seem to be reacting terribly well to this vaccine. Of course, there's been people that like had way worse reactions to it, but I don't know. My doctor even said, they're like, well, we're not really sure you should keep getting this vaccine. Maybe try the Johnson & Johnson one or something, right? Because that one, apparently that one works differently. Well, I mean, I know it works differently. I've read a little bit on it. I was trying not to get stuck too deep in the weeds on this at the moment. But yeah, and it's like, but I went and I got the vaccine, but there's no way I'm going to tell you this state, like, yeah, you can do that. And I think that's what the big problem is right now, is that you have the government doing all these things, giving lots of money to corporations, and then everyone's blaming the corporate greed, and it's like the two of them are working together.
Right. That's the problem, is the two working together. The problem is it's not capitalism, This is not capitalism what we have. I mean, of course, it's never been tried. That's what, a lot of communists say, like, Soviet Russia wasn't communism, But yeah. Needless to say, the problem in both of those situations is corruption, and it's coercion, and it's force, and it's one group of people being able to force people to do something, And that's why socialism cannot be a solution, because it just puts more power in the hands of these people.
Yes. And some leftist friends of mine were like whinging on Facebook about Johnson & Johnson declaring bankruptcy over trying to get out of lawsuits for talcum powder or something. And I don't know how true that claim is. They linked, I think it was an NPR article. But at the same time, it's like, how many millions of dollars, possibly over $1 billion, I'd have to look at another number in front of me, of course, did the government give Johnson & Johnson for vaccine research?
Oh, right? Yeah. How much did they make from the government mandating their vaccine.
And,
You
and,
know?
and it's like, who made the rules that they could declare bankruptcy? Who didn't do the product safety like regulations that they put into place? Like, who runs the court systems and isn't fast tracking these lawsuits? Like, it's all the government. Like, you have the government involved at like 4 different levels here, and Johnson basically just taking advantage of the rules, right?
Yeah.
And you could be
Yeah.
like, well, that's shady, but like, there's 4 other places where you could intervene in this process the way it's set up now. And it's all the freaking government.
Yep. I mean, it's like, man, it's just an intractable problem. You know, you can't get where there's power, there's going to be corruption. You can't get it out. You know, if your system relies on elected officials being moral and just, then it's a problem. You know, and that's why the basic limits set in the documents that we have and stuff that have been just flagrantly destroyed over the last century or so. That's why there's boundaries, and that's why that type of system is the only one that makes sense, you know, is to have these boundaries. And these people, like, especially with COVID, you know, everybody got the shit, like, scared, their daylight scared out of them for 2 years, you know, because they didn't know how to turn off the fucking news. And now they're like, what limits? Please give them all the power to keep me safe, you know? People lost their mind about basic common sense limits, you know, of power.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to see is just the Democrats trying to talk about anything but the economy. They're kind of already doing it, which I think is part of why they brought up the Don't Say Gay bill, or the anti-grooming bill, as the right likes to call it. I just like to think of it as the like transparency in children's health bill, because that's what it really is. I mean, we've read the damn thing.
Yeah, I think that's a much more accurate description.
But but that's the thing with like this whole Elon Musk and Twitter thing, is that he's now on the board of directors there. He's got 9 point something percentage, although he's blocked from owning more than 14% until 2024, which was part of him getting on the board. And a lot of people are like, oh, Trump's going to get his account back. I think if he does, well, that's interesting. What do you think? Do you think he's just going to give him his account back, or do you think that there's more going on here?
Well, I don't know Elon's intentions with it. I do think that, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, look, he's making Neuralink and you know, electric cars, and he's accomplishing the agenda of the Great Reset and all that shit. But like, if he was doing that, then he wouldn't be so outspokenly like rad on a lot of these issues about free speech and stuff. Like, there's no reason why he should be like so loudly pro free speech and individual rights as he's been lately, you know, because if he was part of this, you know. So I do think that he's pretty like based, you know, as far as like the super rich go. And I do think that he just recognizes that like the Great Reset shit and this like global fascist like takeover by the elites that's happening is just going to result in ruin, not just for him, but for a lot of other people. You know?
You just reminded me of what I was trying to say earlier, and I forgot. What I was going to say is that where you have like an issue where someone on the left will say, well, see, the corporations, they buy all this campaign funding, and so it's their fault. It all goes back to them in corruption and complaint. And it's like, well, you've pointed out an issue in the system that we have. How would your system not have this problem or worse? Exactly. And then they can't do it. And it's just like, okay, well,
never.
Like, I can sit here and point at problems with socialism all day, and you can point at problems with democracy or representative republics all day, and that won't get us anywhere unless we can decide on which one has less problems, because they're obviously neither of them are perfect.
Right. But at least, like, I think it's some credit to the system that we have that it's taken this long to get this bad, you know?
That and like conditions across the whole world are still continuing to improve, right? And so we can complain that it's bad, but it's still kind of working as bad as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think of it like we have two types of ideas, right? One, like the one we have, was kind of like free market individual rights, is the dream or the ideal, right? It's never from the gate been actually like fully working to its ideal proportions, you could say. But it's led to a lot of good things, and our system's really not that bad because you can look out into the world and you see a lot of worse shit, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
then you see, on the other hand, like socialism, communism, every single time it's tried, it results in mass bloodshed, mass casualties, mass like famines, like horrendous suffering by the hands of the government to its own people, you know? So it's like you kind of don't really have a leg to stand on, dude. Like,
And that's the thing too, is that like they'll say, oh well, capitalism has killed this many people, and almost all the time that number is a whole bunch of people that starved in some area where like the farming industry fell apart or they whatever. And it's like, well, but if people are starving because of the consequence of their own actions, right? Like that's not really capitalism's fault. that
right. Well, I've seen that like death ticker thing that says like, oh, look at all the people like murdered by capitalism. But it's like basic life sucking stuff. It's like
right.
suffering of life that they're blaming on capitalism.
Yeah,
This is
like
the with like they're so idealist that they don't understand that like some of this shit is just baked into like reality and human, like the corruption,
well
and the
the
greed
yeah,
and the stuff.
they'll say something like, "Oh, well, like a, 1,000 people died in this flood because it wasn't profitable enough to build a dam up the river." And it's like that's not really like that's not the fault in the same way as like the Chinese government killing all the birds and killing millions of people because they decided they wanted a specific policy during their Great Leap Forward.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't like one is that a thing didn't happen and people chose to live in this river valley anyway, knowing the risk. Well, assuming you know the risk, rivers flood, regularly. Like you might not know like an earthquake is coming, but like if you live near a river, there's very little chance it's going to flood in a way that it hasn't flooded for the last several thousand years, right? Versus like the government knowingly went out and did a thing and then the as a direct consequence of the thing they did killed a bunch of people. Like you don't see that very often in capitalism, other than all the stupid wars that we get ourselves involved in. But I
Yeah.
don't
Well,
know that I would call that capitalism either.
that's a problem with the elites again, and a problem with human corruption. That's not a problem with capitalism. That's a problem with governance in power, you know, and the fact that these few corrupt fucking people can make these kind of decisions. But like the about the bridge thing, it's interesting. The unspoken understanding from these people's minds is that like, oh, it wasn't profitable from capitalism, but my system is a perfect system that can accomplish everything perfect. They're not even understanding that when there's no price information in like a socialist system, no businesses are being priced on the market. There's no way to understand where to put resources, so the system collapses and
Right.
it's completely inefficient. And then you have the last bit of efficiency sold off to people for their like corrupt, like to their own corrupt inner circle. They think it's in their mind that it's just going to work,
Well, yeah,
and
like,
that
like there's enough money to build this dam around every single village that exists that could be protected. And it's like, well, there's not that many resources. That's why the market
exactly.
works, is it pushes those resources to where they're needed. And so now to get to the Elon Musk 10% of Twitter thing is that like I was saying, the Democrats, I think they want to talk about right now anything other than the economy. Because even though they could reasonably say, well, look, most of this money was printed under Trump, the budget cap was suspended under Trump, all of the inflation is technically Trump's fault if you want to think about it. They could go down that road, but the thing is that they don't want to take away their ability to print money and do all of these things that they're usually the culprit of. And a lot of those policies that got through under Trump where during the COVID time when he lost control of everything, and even if he would have vetoed them, they might have gotten overridden anyway, right? And so it's just like they don't want to give up their toys, so they're just like, I don't know, I guess it's Putin's fault.
Right. Well, they're actually not only not willing to give it up or admit that they're completely not allowing the idea to come into consciousness that the government can cause inflation through money printing. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you would even suggest the government fights inflation. Our actions have in no way contributed to inflation. Like, meanwhile, they're printing trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. Well, it's insanity.
Well, I don't know that they've printed trillions, because I read that there's only 2 trillion physical dollars in existence, but they've minted a lot of digital money into existence.
Digital printing, yeah.
And then that's the thing is you get where I just completely lost my train of thought. It was something to do. Well, in any case, so I think they're going to try to not talk about the economy, and then that'll be the thing with Elon Musk throwing a wrench in the works on Twitter. I don't think he's going to bring Trump back right away, because that's a carrot that he can dangle, that every time he dangles that carrot, it's going to push the stock price up. Now, if we get to 2024 and he has the ability to do it, which with only 9%, I don't know that he would have the universal ability to just pull that switch on his own, right? But hypothetically, if he could, it might get down to a point where it becomes relevant, and then he does. But I don't know that Trump getting his Twitter account back matters that much. Oh, I remember what I was going to say when I said I lost my train of thought, is that I was telling some of my friends on the right, when Trump lost the 2024 or 2020 election, I mean, was that this might be the best thing to have ever happened to the Republicans, because all of the bad things that they did at the end are just going to end up on the next administration for like all the money printing and everything. And so it's going to make the Democrats look terrible.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. That was so disappointing as shit to see Trump's like fiscal irresponsibility, dude. Because I did have high hopes. Him being an outsider and like a businessman and stuff, like, it's kind of a bummer.
I mean, he did a good job with like deregulating and his tax cuts and things, but like,
he did a lot of good stuff. That's the thing. But
but yeah, he definitely could have held back on some of that. And of course, like, starting the whole Space Force thing, like, we could argue over whether or not that's useful, but it is something that costs a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay.
I don't know much about Space Force. However, I think the idea of like warfare going into space is like very fucking real, you know?
I think it's kind of inevitable. The problem is, of course, you start destroying satellites and you end up with a debris field problem where you can get like a cascade failure of satellites. And then what do you do about it? I know there's some Japanese companies that were pioneering like ways to get junk out of space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's strange to think, because like there's all this stuff in space, but you could think of like, there's, I think, probably more cars on Earth than there are satellites in space. And if all the cars on Earth were orbiting, you know, would they really end up colliding that often? But then again, I guess you only really need something small to happen in order for it to be a big problem to a specific satellite. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think those things are very tough or durable.
Well, they're not, but it's like, it's kind of like in astronomy when they say, like, if you had 2 galaxies collide, the number of stars that actually collide is like none, because they're so far apart that like they don't, everything just passes through each other, and then ends up on the same axis. And you might, I'm sure, I'm sure it's happened over there. Like you'll get stars that get close enough that they end up in their own orbits around each other or something. Uh, you know, but even as a percentage, it's like negligible according to scientists. And so that's where I wonder, like, there's all this stuff in space and they're very concerned about it. And I could see where like it sounds reasonable to be concerned about it, but at the same time I wonder, because they're all at different elevations too. It's not like cars that are all on the surface. You know, like the Starlink satellites are very low. There's other satellites that are very high. Of course, then you have stuff like the James Webb that's not even really, I mean, it's a satellite, but it's not even in orbit around the Earth. It's an orbit around the sun. There's not too many of those, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. We're in a crazy space for sure, though.
Yeah, like they were tracking, for example, where the Russian tank convoy was early on in the Ukrainian conflict, because enough soldiers had their phones on that you could see it as a traffic jam on Google Earth. And so, go on.
Is that the one that they abandoned? Do you hear about that?
Well, they abandoned a couple of them, but it was any of them. And that's the funny thing is it's like satellites have gotten so sophisticated to the point that like they're throwing a wrench in modern warfare as well, where like how do you have to be, I guess you have to be able to figure out a way around that, right? That's going to be a challenge for like modern militaries.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. I mean, hopefully we just fucking grow out of this shit, man. But you know, I think that lately with the Ukraine-Russia thing, I've been thinking that if regular people were in charge, like we wouldn't really have wars and stuff. Because people would just like meet up and they'd be like, "Hey, dude, like let's do anything to avoid going to war right now. We have kids and they're gonna die in this war. So let's like talk and work it out and actually sit down and negotiate and like mediate and be open and transparent about what's going on and our problems and like sit down and see if we can compromise and share and come to agreements, you know? But these people that run our governments in the world are like all psychopaths, dude, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like to that level of leadership, I use that word loosely. I think it just requires such a like abnormal psychology and a sort of like a sociopathic tendency where you kind of you're like a narcissist sociopath type of thing where it's kind of like you become self-absorbed in your own power and you know you stop thinking of people as people and you start to think of them as objects, you know.
Yeah, and it's just like, and that's the thing is a sort of like orbit the same group of topics as that's where you get into like communism not really treating people like people. Like even though they treat them, even if you take it like charitably, right? And you're trying to do all these allegedly good things for people, you're not really tailoring to them as individuals. You're making all these decisions for them. Like this is the kind of education you're getting, this is the kind of health you're getting, these are the kinds of things you're allowed to buy. Like, you know, like does everyone get a Ferrari under communism? Well, no, there aren't enough resources to build that many Ferraris, so no one at all is allowed to drive a Ferrari because they don't exist. And it's
yeah no one is. It kind of takes any natural hierarchy and instead of raising everyone up, it smushes everybody down to the lowest possible common denominator. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, there might be a couple people, well, probably more than a couple people on the bottom that get picked up to that lowest common denominator, but I don't know that anyone is going to be happy, and then there's no way out of it. You're just that it's just what it is. Like, okay, maybe if you get some new technology, then it brings that common denominator up a little bit, but what's the incentive in inventing it if like you're just going to still be the same?
Oh, that's the thing. There's no incentive to invent any new means of improving, you know, lifestyle.
I mean, there'd be a tiny bit of incentive in the sense that, like, you know, assuming it's not an immediate crisis, you got enough people starving that it's like, well, we need to find a way to make more food, right?
yeah, let's take it from the people who are growing it is usually the modus operandi, and then there's a massive fucking famine in the most fertile parts of the country.
Right, but those people getting the food taken off of them, they're going to be like, shit, I need to like produce more, because that way when they come and take it, at least there'll be maybe some, I could hide the excess in my basement. You know what I mean? So,
which works as long as we don't live in a surveillance fucking dystopian hellhole state where they're monitoring every fucking word you say.
which reminds me, I wanted to look into this too, is that Amazon is like putting out their own 3D printer and then like banning the sale of other 3D printers. And I was like suspicious. It was just like I haven't heard this anywhere, but I'm just like off the top of my head, I was like, I wonder if this has anything to do with like the whole ghost gun thing. If they're trying to like, if they like have like always online on their printer or something, so they can harvest your data, but then also like control what you can print.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's about control, dude.
Like I have like no one's said that, but it would not surprise me if that's the case.
Yeah, me neither. Well, yeah. I mean, everything's connected now, right? So they see and hear everything that you're doing, you know?
Mm-hmm. And then what's funny though about that is that most of the parts for 3D printers can be printed on 3D printers. So even if you ended up in a case where like, okay, well, the government has made it so that all the 3D printers have to be online and we can monitor everything, well, like then you're just going to buy the Amazon 3D printer, print out the parts to build your own non-Amazon 3D printer, and then print your own guns.
Just one extra step.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And you're like, what? I was just making replacement parts. I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's awesome.
So I've kind of run out of topics. I know you didn't have as much time today, which is fine. Our episodes have been going longer.
I did want to just say one thing before we wrap up. That you kind of jogged my memory about something that I think about a lot. In terms of individuality versus collectivism, and that you mentioned that like socialism can't see people in terms of being an individual, and that's very true. That's why, like, to me, the system that we have, albeit imperfect and like we need to improve upon it, is like so much more in the realm of like truth, the truth of what reality is and what the human being is, because it does acknowledge it's sort of built on the basic fundamental fact that the most indivisible unit is the individual, you know? And socialism is built upon that the individual is not the most basic and important unit. The collective is the most basic and important unit. But what's a collective if not a group of individuals? It's really just you are part of a hive and you don't matter. So get in line and do your part for the collective, you know? So it does end up invariably demeaning the individual into basically a cog in a wheel, you know, because it's built upon that the premise that the individual is less important than the collective, you know. And my premise that no individual is more important than any other individual. However, the collective is simply a group of individuals. That's what it is. And it's just a concept for a group of individuals. And you can make sort of policy ideas or like conceptual ideas based on like, okay, what's best for this group of individuals right now? But you can't lose the fact that the collective literally is the group of individuals, because that's what it is, you know, because any other understanding of the collective makes that idea higher than the individuals itself, you know, and the collective good is supposed to be serving the individuals in the collective, you know.
I like to think of it like this, right? So in an individual centered society, everyone has the tools they need to survive, and often it's easier to survive together, so everyone by necessity or by choice, at least for the most part, moves together to continue surviving. Now you might have one guy wander off, and if he wanders off and makes bad decisions, he might end up getting dead. And if he goes off and makes good decisions, he might end up a billionaire, right? But in the collectivist system, everyone has to move together, and if for some reason you end up straying off, whether it's by choice or by circumstance, you don't have any tools to survive. You're just done for.
If you wander off, you'll definitely be dead.
Right.
Because they'll
exactly. And
you will not be dead, you will be dead. And the collective, it's a huge difference to be volunteerism, you know, to be run on volunteerism versus coercion. That's a massive difference, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Elect by choice to work together, you know. That's a huge.
All right, yeah, that reminds me. There was like I remember I was trying to think. There was like a topic I was going to bring up, and I couldn't remember what it was. And it was this, and I'm not going to get into it now, but there was this debate between Carl Benjamin or Sargon of Akkad and Rucka Ali, who's more known for making super offensive music videos like Weird Al, but more offensive on YouTube, and somehow he hasn't been banned yet. Although what's funny is he made a song making fun of Obama, and then he made a song making fun of Trump, and out of all of the songs that they took down the song making fun of Trump.
That's
but in any case, but what Rucka also does is he is a fellow with the Ayn Rand Institute of the UK, and so the two of them sat down and they argued about individualism, where Sargon or Carl accuses objectivists of being too individualistic. And it was interesting because I feel like even though Rucka is supposed to be arguing on behalf of objectivism, I felt like I could have made his argument better than he did for himself. But I'd have to get really into it. Maybe I'll make an individual one about that sometime.
Dude, this is a great topic. At some point, it's a big topic, so we can't get into it. But I think that the true core of the individual, of yourself, when you really look in, it's invariable to come to the conclusion that you are no more important than anyone else, and you have a duty in a way to, love everyone else. And I guess that's a little like frou-frou sounding, but to make also improve your own situation and also other people's situation. It's kind of just like baked into like who we are. Now, you can argue that so many people are run by greed and anger and these lower emotions and power, but I would say that those people are not really looking deep in.
Well, how about we do this? Actually, now that we're talking about it, how about next time we'll do our next topic will be individualism. We'll explore that maybe next episode.
Yeah, that'd be good. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, then, everyone, I guess we could look forward to that. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, not really, man. I think this was good. I think we touched a lot of topics, and I like that though. I like kind of meandering around a little bit and then like honing in on something when it's appropriate. And I'm a big picture type of thinker, so I'm always like drawing conclusions between different disciplines and like doing more of surveys, like conceptual surveys of ideas and stuff, rather than like adhering to one specific dogma or perspective or something, and that's just how I think. I'm a global thinker, so and I think there's so much to over specialization, I think, nowadays, because there's so much complexity in different disciplines and stuff, and I think we lost some of that generalist thinking to kind of rein in the like more extreme and crazy reductionist viewpoints of people that are kind of like tunnel vision about their one specific specialization,
Well, yeah, I think it's because also people like, well, what about the exception? But we've gotten so far into what about the exception that we forgot about the majority.
Right, and the like basic probability. Like probability is a science, man. Like you can really work out like how probable things are, like pretty simply. And then if stuff is like extremely improbable, there's really no reason to like put too many intellectual resources into it. Like let's deal with the fucking shit that is probable.
All right. Well, I think that'll be where we end it. And next time unless something really interesting happens in the news, we'll try to discuss individualism. Oh, then my camera just kicked on automatically, so now you can see my lighting's bad again, and you can see my glorious sheet.
Oh, yeah, you were in the black void of space.
Yeah, and something just happened where it just decided, no, I'm done with that. All right, well, anyway, I'll see you guys next time.
All right, see ya.